What up, gunfighters? It's been a while since I've done a new, Better Know a cartridge. Specifically about one cartridge, because, to be honest, I did a lot of them, and kind of didn't think there were any more good ones to do. But the other day I stumbled across a cartridge that I'd come across before, and I thought, you know what, that one, which can't really keep you in suspense because you probably clicked on the podcast, which gave you the title, is the 308 Norma Magnum. That's the cartridge we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. Like, subscribe, leave a review, and if this is not your first rodeo and you want to support this podcast, American, small business, veteran-owned, operated, all the buzzwords, gluten-free, consider becoming a patron. They get a lot of cool insider-only content. With that, I'm going to throw in a rapid-fire version of the bio, and then we'll talk about the 308 Norma Magnum. Blessed to have served in military, law enforcement, combat veteran, private contractor, competition shooter, lifelong hunter, guide. Blessed by God that He got me through all those things so I could share this firsthand training, knowledge, experience with you to serve you today. Let's dive into the podcast. Think it's a hard to find round? Well, I had a hard time finding it in the Cartridges of the World book, way in the back, under European sporting cartridges. I'm going to read to you, that said, from Cartridges of the World. It was a gift from a patron. Thank you. The 308 Norma Magnum was introduced in 1960 by A.B. Norman Projektilfabrik of Amatafas, Sweden. In its original form, this cartridge was something of a semi-wildcat because only unprimed brass cases were available and no commercial rifles were chambered for it. However, about 18 months later, it was introduced. Norma began producing factory ammunition. Several European manufacturers chambered the round as standard or on order. The 308 Norma Magnum is practically identical to the Wildcat 338, which is the 338 Winchester Magnum neck down to .30 caliber. However, the two cases are not interchangeable because of the difference in body length. Almost any standard length .30-06 rifle can be rechambered to make the 308 Norma cartridge. This cartridge is also similar to a number of .30 caliber Wildcat Magnums based on the blown out and shortened 300 Holland, and known collectively as the 300 Short Magnum group. The 30 Luft, the 300 Apex rather, and Ackley Short 30 Magnum are respectively of this class, are respective of this class. The 308 Norma Magnum is adequate for any North American big game and should do well on African Plains game. Powder capacity is only a hair greater than that of the 300 H&H, but the shape of the case is radically different. This is a proprietary cartridge of European origin designed specifically for the North American market. It has previously been placed with the American cartridges because most U.S. readers will look for it here. Technically, it belongs in the chapter covering European cartridges. Okay. That's pretty cool. The main reason I wanted to cover this cartridge is that I've actually seen a rifle chambered in this, and I thought you might come across one too. The reason why is the 300 Winchester mag, the 300 Win Mag, which is your common American .30 caliber Magnum today, even with all the newer ones, came out in 1963. This came out in 1960, so it predates it. A lot of Magnums, those two I believe included, were some form or fashion based on the 375 H&H, which a child of that was the 300 H&H, which is a really cool cartridge, right? I suggest if you want something different and you're looking for a Magnum and you don't want the 300 mag, maybe you want something a little bit in between the 30-06 and the 300 Win Mag, you might look at the 300 H&H. However, that requires a Magnum length action. This one is kind of blown out and shortened. Blown out just meaning there's less taper in it, and shortened. And as it mentioned in Cartridge of the World, almost any standard length 30-06 rifle can be rechambered to take the 308 Norma cartridge. So if you're looking to get a gun rebarreled, or you find one of these and you're thinking, what is this thing? Unlike many other rifles that need a Magnum length action, if you don't have one of those or don't want one of those, a standard length action 308 Norma Magnum. If you want a just cool, obscure 300 Magnum, and again, it was made from a common case, so you should, as a reloader, this is more advanced reloading, right? This is not for your hobbyist reloader. But if you don't want to go out and buy the brass, you can probably make it from a common cartridge, or several common cartridges. Because many of the Magnums base their lineage, not all, especially the modern ones, but many of the classic Magnums base their lineage to the 375 H&H, kind of the OG Magnum. So it's a really cool cartridge. Let's talk about some numbers. It lists here in Cartridges of the World a 100 grain at 3,500 feet a second. That's pretty hot. And it lists a 220 grain at 2,800. Now, to put that in perspective, one of my go-to big and dangerous game loads for the 30-06 is a 220 grain. And this is Remington Core Lock. It's a factory load. And it lists a velocity of 2410. Now, again, the 308 Norma Magnum lists a 220 grain bullet at 2,800. That is not a marginal increase in velocity. That's significant. That's a significant increase in velocity. And just some other loads from here. It lists a 180 grain, which is what you might consider if you were looking at bigger game, which you probably would be for this. 180 grain soft point at 3,100 feet a second. And your numbers will vary. These are just the numbers in the book. And why might you want one of these? Well, you might just get a really good deal on it. And I would not advise you to get this unless you're a hand loader. However, if you are and you're kicking around a gun store, a gun show, and it's an otherwise really good rifle, like a classic Mauser action, or somebody rebarreled a pre-64 Winchester that you've always wanted, but this one's a screaming deal because nobody wants it in 308 Norma. Well, you might, now that you've heard this podcast, and you think, I basically know what that cartridge is and what it can do. Pretty much anything you'd look at the 300 Win Mag to do, this cartridge will do. That said, if you're looking at a brand new factory rifle, or you're going to get a rifle rebarreled yourself, unless you just want something obscure, probably go with the 300 Win Mag or one of the other mags, or like I mentioned before, if you want something a little in between, the 300 H&H. But it's not a bad cartridge. It's just fairly obscure. But I have come across it, and I thought there's people out there that might want to learn about the 308 Norma Magnum. And keep this one fairly short and sweet for a better know a cartridge, the 308 Norma Magnum. Hope you enjoyed this. I hear that some people really like listening to with their kids. I heard from one of the patrons about the different cartridges, and that makes me happy. I'm glad that you enjoy it here on Gunfighter Life, the podcast. We talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, different cartridges, the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. With that, your tactical tip of the day. Likely, if you listen to this, you have a ranged bag, and you've got all kinds of different things in there. One of the things you may consider having in there is at least one or maybe several different small hand files. If you're the kind of guy that actually views guns as tools, not Barbie dolls, and you don't mind taking a file to your gun, and you're not incompetent when it comes to mechanics, there are certain times where you might want to knock off a hard edge or something on a rifle, or many other things with a file. So just a small hand file, they're not expensive, they can be very utilitarian, might belong in your range bag. With that, your tactical verse of the day. You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.